Hey everybody, I'm not new to you at this point, but Kevin is. Kevin, welcome. It's an honor to have you here. Kevin deals with one of the biggest issues in our country, which is housing, and his company, which he'll tell you a bit about, provides a tremendous amount of homes to people that are comfortable, affordable. And tell me about a little bit about the culture or how are your homes different from others and the customer experience?
Sure. Excuse me. Well, first off, kudos to everybody in the room. It is almost 4 o'clock on a long day. Appreciate you hanging in there with us. I'd like to think it's because of our panel, Steve, but I know there's a reception after this that at least has refreshments and maybe alcohol, so that may be the draw. But you know, our focus at PulteGroup is to build amazing homes where people can live their dreams. And you know, that sounds maybe a little dramatic, but it's something that we really believe in. And to give you a little bit more context, you know, we're a public company. We're going to release earnings tomorrow. So if I gave you specific information, I'd have to kill you. And so you'll know more about it tomorrow. But we'll deliver in 2024 over 30,000 new homes across the country. And we are a production home builder. So we're focused on efficiency. We're focused on operational excellence, the things you might expect to be able to do that. What makes our homes different, better, and special, it's really rooted in the people who build our homes, our employees and our trade partners. And the fact that we not only encourage, but we expect and we empower them to make sure that we are delivering homes that meet the needs of our consumers. And so the flooring that people want, the colors that people want, hardscape, softscape that people want. We're not legislating that out of our corporate office in Atlanta. We are legislating and we're ceding those decision rights to the people that are interacting with our customers on a regular basis. And that's really been our secret sauce. It's how do we activate our employees, unlock the power of our people so that we can exceed the expectations of our valued customers.
And in fact, you told me backstage that you lived in one of your company's houses before you even joined the company. So you were able to like test drive it, right? So, and you
we did.
Made a favorable impression.
We did. In fact, the lights are bright up here, but my wife is in the audience. So let me shout out my wife, Tina. I outran my punt coverage when she and I got married. And so Tina and I both live in a Pulte home currently. We bought it before I started working for the company. And it's actually the third Pulte product that we've lived in. We've lived in a couple of John Whelan homes. For those of you who are local to Atlanta, that's one of our companies, one of our brands that we own as well.
Wow. Could you tell us a little bit about your own path to this role? It seems like, you know, a real HR calling. Your father was an HR leader, and then your career took you to like Office Depot, both Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. And so what did you find rewarding that kept you, you know, chugging along in this path?
Sure. I love the beverage reference, chugging along.
Yes.
So Coke and Pepsi, I get asked about that a lot. I was lost and then I got found. We're in Atlanta, so you guys guess which is which. But you know, earlier in my career, my mother didn't think I could keep a job because I did work for a bunch of different brands. But my dad was an HR executive. He was the chief HR officer for his company. I think that, you know, certainly inspired me. I got to see all the wonderful things he got to do in service to others. And one of the things that I really, really, really enjoy about HR is it's kind of my business to be in everybody else's business. You know, if I worked in finance, and let's say I was walking through a manufacturing facility, and I asked the manufacturing person, why is that pallet of product right there? Or, you know, how long has that product been sitting here on the floor? You know, cash is king. What would happen is that manufacturing person would get kind of defensive, and you know, it may not be the most productive conversation. Or if I was an IT person and I was having a conversation with the marketing folks, and I'm saying, well, you know, we've employed this technology, and what's the return on ad spend that you're getting? in applying this technology. Again, the dukes might go up, the fighting stance, might be taken, but I'm just the HR person. And so I get to wander around and meander and say, hey, I got a question. How long's that pallet of wood been sitting there? Oh, it's been sitting there for 3 weeks. Well, what's your throughput? You guys call it throughput, right? I mean, I know what they call it, but and they answer the questions. Or what's up with this technology? Or why are we accounting for this way? Did you accrue for that? So it's my business to be in everybody's business. And the transferable kind of asset that's ubiquitous across not just business, but organizations, whether you're for-profit, nonprofit, public, private, et cetera, it's people. And the ability to connect with people, activate people, and leverage people to do extraordinary things. And so that's what really, got me enamored. And I'm still fired up, after 27 years as a chief HR officer. Well, still love doing what I'm doing.
There is that phrase, management by walking around, which is, or a little bit like being a journalist. You have a license to be nosy or curious, a license to ask questions. Your company is consistently rated as a great place to work, which isn't easy to achieve. People have lots to gripe about at companies, but it's also happening at a time when a lot of workers are saying they're kind of stuck or they're stalled or this or that, but they're afraid to leave their job. So what are some of the key elements of what makes it a great place to work, that they feel fulfilled?
Yeah, first off, I mean, we're super humbled by some of the acknowledgement and recognition, and we really kind of accept that as an accountability with a capital A, because it sets an expectation and really puts the pressure on us to make sure that we are delivering the kinds of experiences to people where they say, yeah, this makes sense. You guys are a pretty decent place to work. But a lot of it is meeting people where they are and figuring out what the unlocks are and using our platform and being good stewards of what we've been put in charge of. We're a for-profit company. There's nothing wrong with that. We have to make money in order to be solvent, in order to give people jobs, in order to invest in training, in order to give people, competitive wages, provide them with great benefits. And so we're unapologetic about, our need to deliver on our performance promises and keep our performance promises. And so no problem with the what. We get really, really, really focused on the how. And again, making sure that people feel empowered, that they've been positioned to be successful in their roles, that we're investing in people. I was sitting in the back of the room listening to a few other panels, and great content today. Again, kudos to the organizers and all the participants and each of you in the audience. But one of the things that I heard loud and clear, and it was one of the panelists were talking about some of the weather we had here in Atlanta recently, and people being able to make the decision that I just don't feel comfortable or safe coming to work. And she used the word, which I thought was great, that if that doesn't exist, the culture's broken. And so we work really hard to make sure that our culture is intact, that it's not broken, and that we afford people the opportunity to be empowered to make decisions that are going to be right for them. Because if the decisions are right for them, then they're generally going to be right for us as an organization, and we win together.
Well, branching off that, could you tell me a little bit more about trust? It's a big value, but you can't just trust randomly or willy-nilly. The stakes are high. Delta Airlines has to trust their flight crews to make a lot of emergency decisions and things, but there's a lot of structure. How do you build that in so that you can have workers make expensive decisions about the customers and everybody?
Well, I think it starts with, again, setting that expectation. Yeah. And it's rooted in accountability. And an accountability to do the best you can across, many different circumstances, many of which we can anticipate, many of which we can't anticipate. And creating a culture context where people know that if I make a bad decision and I fail forward. Growing up, I played baseball. One of the reasons I played baseball is because if there's any baseball players out, you can strike out 6.5 times out of 10 times. And you're still going to Cooperstown, which is the Baseball Hall of Fame. And so there's no expectation that you're going to bat 1,000 because nobody's going to get everything right all the time. But you have to have a culture context that says when you strike out, dust your knees off, get back into the batter's box, using that example, and take another cut at it. And we recognize and celebrate people who fail as much as we recognize and celebrate people who succeed. And I think when you do that over time, that's how you build trust, and you make deposits into the trust bank.
So it's, well, in terms of leadership, what are some of the leadership values at your company? You told me a little bit about a kind of a stewardship and also sort of a spiritual component of it. It almost sounded a little bit religious, but maybe it's more about the spiritual aspect of it. Can you tell me where that sort of a little more of the substance of that culture?
Sure. Well, and just to clarify, and I think what we were talking about earlier, Steve, this whole concept of servant leadership.
Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily have a religious or a spiritual connotation. It's kind of rooted in the premise that leaders should be other-centered, and you should be focused on supporting and advocating and engaging with other people so that they can be successful. And if they're successful, then we're successful. Some of you may be familiar. I went to Cornell, so it's rare that I quote Harvard, but it's a Harvard Business School kind of case study. It's the service profit chain, which basically says if you take care of your folks take care of your customers take care of you, and then you can invest resources back into taking care of your folks. And it's a really virtuous flywheel that gets created. And those are a lot of the cultural tenets that we teach our leaders. We pour into our leaders. We incentivize and compensate our leaders for those kinds of behaviors. And many of you probably have human resource planning processes, succession processes, performance reviews, competency models, all those kinds of things. All of ours are rooted in building great leaders, extraordinary leaders who can activate their employees.
One thing I'm wondering about is innovation. Well, you talked about recognition, like when you catch somebody doing something right, but there's also probably it goes maybe hand in hand with having somebody have a great idea. And people think of houses as, well, a house is a house, but in fact, there's a tremendous amount of science and development and probably adaptation, like as will have to happen in California. How do you encourage workers to do that, to like bring up crazy ideas?
Yeah, no, I again, thematically, I think it starts with trust and empowering people. But you can't empower people if you haven't given them the skills and the capabilities to be empowered. Yeah. I think you also, back to culture, you have to create a culture of appropriate risk-taking. Because if you don't have a culture of appropriate risk-taking and everybody is playing not to lose as opposed to playing to win, you will rarely experience breakthrough performance. Yeah. But if you have a culture of appropriate risk-taking where you say, give it a shot. Again, you don't have to bat 1,000. We're playing baseball. That's when you experience breakthrough performance. And we translate that out, and I was mentioning Steve earlier, as we sit here this afternoon, we're building in 900 plus communities across the country, literally. And I have no idea, full disclosure to my closest friends, I have no idea what many of our employees are doing right now. I'm hopeful they're doing the right thing, but I don't know. And so you create this culture of appropriate risk-taking where if a consumer comes in and says, a month ago when we were in the design center and I picked this tile, I thought that was the tile that I wanted. But now that I see it laid and it's in the light and I see how it contrasts against the cabinets that I picked, I don't really like that tile anymore. Now, in that moment, an employee can do one of two things, maybe one of three things. They can say, too bad, so sad, that's the tile, right? Yeah. Or they can say, that's one. Two might be, we can rip it up, but it's going to add another month to your build time, and it's going to cost you another $15,000, making up a number. The third thing they can do is say, you know what, Mrs. Consumer, I want to make sure you're pleased with this home. And that's great feedback. What tile would you like? And we take care of it. And my hope, and what we instill in our employees and our leaders, is that more times than not, they're going to make that third decision. And that's going to be the exchange and the conversation with the consumer.
And then there might be repeat buyers and word of mouth and all kinds of good things can happen from that. One of the most important thing about attracting and retaining workers these days is a career development, a path. How does that work? And I mean, you're in your industry where there's like tradespeople, there's folks who are maybe siloed or this or that. How do you create that place for them to grow?
Again, a lot of intentionality.
Yeah.
In our business, just you guys are going to leave here knowing more about home building than you ever wanted to know. But our business starts with acquiring land because you have to have dirt to build something. So land is a function for us. Then we have to get that land entitled to build something. So entitlement is kind of a function for us. Construction is a function for us because you have to build it. Then you have to sell it. So we have a huge sales force that works for us. These are the folks, if you've ever been in a new home community, that are taking you through models and reviewing design boards and those kind of things. Then after we sell it, we build it, we have to kind of service it. So we have a huge customer service complement. A lot of people don't know we have a very big bank with my company. So we service most of our mortgages and title insurance, among other things. And so there's a financial services arm to the company. And so, again, we're very intentional about creating career paths for folks. A little bit of a paradigm shift around career paths. In fact, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. I said, don't think about a career ladder, where it's just a vertical path of progression. I said, think about a career monkey bar or jungle gym, right? Where maybe you're doing this, and then you're going to do that, and then you're going to do this, and then you do that. And let's meet you where you are, and let's tap into the intersection on an individual level between passion and purpose. And what brings you joy? And then let's figure out how we can bring you joy through your employment with us. And we're very transparent. Again, like many of you, we have pretty well thought out and developed human resources systems. We have a lot of things that people can do on their own. So we can see the salmon that want to swim upstream, right? And who's going to kind of invest in their own development. And then we meet them where they are and provide them with some intentional focus to help them actualize in their career interests.
Now, speaking of opportunity, that's the segue to one of the hottest button concepts right now is DEI, which started out as sort of like a lot of effort and consensus behind it, and now it's fighting words. So, but your company, you have a little different approach to that in the sense you've never had a chief diversity officer. It's been sort of baked in. Can you tell us about how that works in a way that it's organic and that it is probably a course you can stay on?
Mm-hmm. Sure, and again, I really appreciate the question. And more context. Again, I've been in a chief HR officer, chief people officer job for 27 years, 6 or 7 different public companies. Again, many of which Steve mentioned. And I have personally, I have never had a chief diversity officer in my organization. I'm an N of 1, so this is Kevin's perspective. The reason I have not is because I have never wanted anyone in any of the organizations that I've led to have the ability to abdicate their responsibility for culture. And my concern was there is some likelihood that somebody would say, well, that's that person's job. It's not my job. It's this person's job or that person's job. And I just have a real strong bias to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, the honesty is, functionally, I own all the human resource systems. And so, I'm leaning in through my teams, I'm driving results. We're meeting and exceeding our expectations around things like valuing differences, and I'll build on that in just a moment. And even more specifically at PulteGroup, we talk about valuing differences. And you may say, well, what are differences? Well, differences in backgrounds, circumstances, and beliefs. I introduced my wife earlier. She's from Birmingham, Alabama. I'm from New York. I'm from Queens, although she's taught me to say y'all and fixin' every once in a while. And sometimes we go to our Pulte home, and it might be too cold. And we both agree it's cold. And she may say, well, turn the air down. And I may say, no, what are you talking about? Turn the air up. Because where you stand on things depends on where you sit. It's just your perspective. And if she said to me, which thankfully she doesn't, you're from New York, you're an idiot. That's not how that works. Or if I said, which I don't, sweetie, I don't, well, you're from Alabama, this is how this works, we wouldn't get anything done and we would freeze to death. And so the honesty is, let's find common ground. Let's value the differences that exist in one another. And then let's get accomplished what we want to accomplish. And that's the approach we take at PulteGroup. And for us, one of our aspirations, our missional purpose, is to be the most respected home builder in America. If you go on our website, you'll see that. And I can't take credit for it. It was there before I joined the company. And I really thought about it. And I had a conversation with the CEO. I said, you could have picked a lot of different words. The most profitable, the fastest growing, the most revered, the most feared, the most pervasive, the most ubiquitous, anything. You chose respected. And he and I were having this conversation this morning against the backdrop of what's going on with DEI. And I said, you can't be the most respected home builder if we're not the most respecting employer. Because there's a law of reciprocity between those two things. And so how do you do that? You have to understand, value, and ultimately leverage differences. Well, how do you do that? You suspend natural biases, prejudices, and assumptions. And it's kind of like my grandma told me when I was growing up. Don't judge a book by its cover. Crack the book, read a few chapters, and then judge. And so we're very intentional, building capability on our organization, enhancing skill sets with our leaders and our employees around how you can suspend natural biases, prejudices, and assumptions. My view, again, I'm an N of one. The term DEI, a lot of the work around DEI, it's got baggage, it's been weaponized. I feel very comfortable with the way we've positioned things and how we've pivoted, and we've got the entire organization rallying around a need for us to value differences because that's how we are going to be the most respected home builder in America. We've got less than a minute left, but I wanted to ask you about something very much in the news. It's not necessarily about workforces, but it's about the terrible community disaster we saw in Pacific Palisades and Altadena. Will those communities be rebuilt? And what will it take? And I realize you could write a book, but just the headlines of that. Yeah, I think yes. Yeah. I hope yes. Because the demand is there, right? Yeah. People's homes, their memories, their lives, and as Americans, we're incredibly resilient in the face of adversity, and we have a history that shows us that. So I think yes. I think it's going to take collaboration, and I think it's going to take cooperation between the public sector, the private sector, federal agencies, state agencies, municipal agencies, because if everybody retreats to their own corners, I think it's going to be harder. But it gets back to if we can find common ground and everybody gets focused on the business of caring for the people who've been negatively impacted, I'm incredibly optimistic that we'll get the job done. Those are some great pieces of land that they still own, and hopefully they can. Just one last thing, which is one piece of advice for the audience, HR leaders and in other fields, about how they can make their businesses a great place to work. Start with trust, building relationships with each other, with your employees. The fifth date is always better than the first date. First date, you're eating chicken wings with a fork, right? You get to the fifth date, you're really enjoying it. And that's because you've built trust and you've created a relationship with one another. And so make sure, now I don't want you to say that the HR guy told me we should have more dates at work. I didn't say that, we have policies against that. But build relationships with people, meet them where they are, and help folks, it sounds hokey, but help folks find their joy, and you'll find your joy in the process. I devoutly believe that. Thank you, and I'm going to take that phrase, chicken wings eating with a fork, back up north and use that somehow in a conversation. Well, Kevin, thank you. This was terrific. It's an honor to have you here. Your company is so revered. Learned a lot.
So that's it, folks. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. We hope we can meet you outside there and say hello. And then also, while we only come in person to Atlanta once a year, we're online all the time, virtual conferences. So please tune in. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you.